The UK's Labour Party has accused the ruling Conservatives of lavish spending using taxpayer-funded debit cards. Now, the Keir Starmer-led Labour Party is set to launch a social media campaign on this. The campaign will aim to highlight five-star hotel visits by some senior Tory leaders. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and new Tory Chairman Greg has come under their radar. Now, according to Labour Party, the amount spent is somewhere near £145 million. Labour says in 2021, Sunak stayed at a five-star hotel where the spendings were more than £4,500 on accommodation for Sunak and his aides. UK's main opposition party further added that Rishi Sunak's treasury spent around £3,300 on 13 fine art photographs and more than £100,000 on communication workshops from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Labour described the spending as a scandalous catalogue of waste. Labour leaders say this comes as the UK is facing the worst cost of living crisis for decades, and Prime Minister Sunak has failed to keep a watch on lavish spendings in his government. However, a senior Tory source said that information about the use of government procurement cards, or GPCs, is already in the public domain. One Conservative leader even pointed out that the cards were introduced by a Labour government in 1997, and it was only made transparent by a Tory-led government in 2011. Now, for more on this, Dr. Nigel Fletcher, a political analyst, is joining us live from London. Thank you for being with us. Take us through these accusations by the UK's Labour Party of the Conservatives' lavish spending. Is this another tactic by Labour to undermine the Tories?
Well, it certainly is, and I have to say it's a very effective one. I spend a lot of my time as an academic looking at political opposition and the tactics and strategies that are used by opposition parties, and this one really is an absolutely textbook example of what an opposition party tries to do between elections to attack the government and to score hits against them. It's done so very effectively, and from reading the reports of this exercise, they'll be very pleased that this is leading the headlines in the UK and indeed around the world on UK politics, because they've spent many months on this. The stories show that they have put in lots of freedom of information requests. They've put in parliamentary questions over many months in order to get this information. So they've built a website with all of the information on it. They've picked out the choicest examples of government spending. And of course, during a cost of living crisis, this is the kind of story which is going to be very effective. The contrast between people's struggle to pay their own bills and seeing government ministers, as it appears, living the high life, spending money on very expensive hotels, flights, and all sorts of other things. So it's a very effective tactic, and it plays into the kind of narrative that an opposition party will always want to do, which is that the government is somehow out of touch and that the opposition is holding them to account. So I think, you'd have to score them 10 out of 10 for the tactics on this. Whether the substance, I think, is fair is perhaps another question.
Absolutely. And what has the reaction been by the government?
Well, as you were saying in your introduction, the government has responded by saying that these cards, these procurement cards, were brought in the first place by the Labour government in 1997, and that it was only when the Conservatives came to office in 2010, 2011, that their use was made more transparent and cracked down upon. I think it's a very difficult question for the government to have to address, but I think that the point I'm hearing from them in some of the responses that I've seen is that this is spending that is actually in most cases, reasonably justified. And certainly if you look at some of these big ticket items, what we're talking about here are hotels for officials travelling with ministers abroad. It's entertainment of foreign dignitaries in the UK and other things like that. And a lot of it is, having scrolled through some of the details earlier this morning, I can see lots of things there which anyone in any office would recognise as being regular business expenses and IT and that sort of thing. But as I say, I think it's the the small examples that get picked out, which are more difficult to justify when you see things like expenditure on sort of photographs and art for the walls and things, which are clearly not essential, but which look rather embarrassing for the government. It's things like that. And we've seen all of this before. We've seen this kind of scandal hit UK politics in 2009 when there was an expenses scandal over MPs' claims. And again, a lot of those things were normal business expenses, but it's these isolated examples. It's the things which any reasonable person around the country struggling with their bills will find excessive that Labour are able to highlight. And they're doing so, I think, quite effectively.
Yeah.